My name is Ethan. I'm 24 and I live in a small house on the edge of a sleepy suburban neighborhood. The kind where the streets are quiet enough to hear crickets at night and everyone's lawn is trimmed just right. I work as a night security guard at a warehouse on the outskirts of town, pulling 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. shifts. It's not glamorous, checking gates, scanning monitors, walking empty lots with a flashlight, but it pays the bills and I like the solitude. The world feels different at night, like it's holding its breath. And I've always been okay with that kind of quiet. I've been on my own for a while now. My dad passed 2 years ago in a car accident and it hit me harder than I let on. He was the one who taught me how to change a tire, how to swing a bat, how to keep my word. After he was gone, my mom moved a few states away to live with her sister. We talk sometimes, but it's not the same. I stayed here in the house I bought with my savings. A small one-bedroom with creaky floors and a porch that needs fixing. It's just me. A fridge full of takeout and a routine that keeps me steady. Work, sleep, repeat. I don't mind. Keeps things simple. This neighborhood is the kind where people wave but don't linger. Everyone knows your name but not your story. Across the street lives Claire. She's 39, I think, though I've never asked. She moved in about 3 months ago, right after what I heard was a rough divorce. I don't know the details. Nobody here does. She keeps to herself, always hurrying to her car with a bag slung over her shoulder, her face half hidden behind sunglasses. We've nodded at each other a few times, maybe said hey once or twice when we both happened to grab the mail at the same time. She's not cold, just distant, like she's built a wall and doesn't expect anyone to knock. I can't say I blame her. She's got this air about her. Tall with dark hair that's usually tied back and a way of moving that says she's been through enough to know better. I don't know much about her, but I've noticed things. The way her lights stay on late, the jazz music that drifts from her window some nights, the fact that she never has visitors. It's not like I'm watching her, but when you live across the street, you see things. You notice. And maybe I noticed her a little more than I meant to. My days blur together. I sleep through most of the morning, wake up around noon, make coffee, maybe fix something around the house. I'm good with my hands. Comes with the job. I've rewired lamps, patched drywall, even built a shelf for my dad's old coin collection. That's how I keep busy. Keep the quiet from getting too loud. Nights are for work. Driving to the warehouse under a sky that's all stars and no noise. I like it that way. No drama, no complications, just me and the road. That night started like any other. I got home around 4:15 a.m., bone tired from a long shift. The warehouse had been quiet, just a flickering light in Sector 3 that I had to report. I kicked off my boots, tossed my keys on the counter, and collapsed onto the couch without even bothering to change. Sleep was pulling me under fast, the kind of heavy sleep that comes after 8 hours on your feet. I thought I'd dream of nothing like usual, but then it came sharp, desperate, cutting through the haze. A knock, not a polite tap, but a frantic pounding like someone was running out of time. It was 3 a.m. and nothing good happens at 3 a.m. I was half asleep when the knocking yanked me back to the world. It wasn't the kind of sound you ignore, sharp, uneven, like someone's fist was pleading against the wood. My heart kicked up, adrenaline cutting through the fog of exhaustion. I stumbled off the couch, still in my work clothes, the clock on my phone glowing 3:02 a.m. Nothing good happens at this hour. I grabbed my keys off the counter, not sure why, and moved to the door, my boots still untied by the mat. The knocking stopped, then started again, softer, but urgent. I flipped on the porch light and opened the door. There she was, Claire, my neighbor, from across the street, the one I barely knew beyond a nod or two. She stood there barefoot in a thin gray robe that clung to her frame, her arms wrapped tight around herself like she was holding herself together. Her dark hair was loose, tangled, catching the yellow light. Her face was pale, eyes wide and red-rimmed like she'd been crying or hadn't slept. She was trembling, not just from the chilly night air. Before I could say anything, she stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper, shaking as much as she was. "I heard footsteps in my house," she said. "Someone's in there." "I'm scared, Ethan." My stomach dropped. I didn't know her well, but the fear in her voice was real, raw, like a wire stripped bare. "Stay here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. In the yard. Don't move. I turned back inside, grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and a baseball bat from the closet. Old chipped, but heavy enough. My job had taught me to stay calm, to assess first, act second. But this wasn't a warehouse gate. This was her home, her safety. I glanced back at Claire, still standing under the porch light, her breath visible in the cold. You sure you heard someone? I asked, needing to confirm. She nodded. Her lips pressed tight. Footsteps upstairs. An door creaked. I ran out. I nodded, gripping the bat tighter. Okay, I'll check it out. Call 911 if you hear anything else. She shook her head, almost frantic. No cops. Not yet. I can't deal with them right now. Her voice cracked and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Something deeper than this moment. It may be tied to whatever she'd left behind in the city. I didn't push. Stay here, I repeated, and crossed the street to her house. Her front door was still ajar, just a sliver enough to make my skin crawl. I pushed it open slowly, the hinges creaking in the silence. The house was dark, save for a faint glow from a lamp in the living room. I clicked on my flashlight, sweeping the beam across the entryway. Everything looked normal. Shoes by the door, a coat rack, a small table with unopened mail. But the air felt wrong, heavy, like it was holding its breath. I moved forward, bat in one hand, flashlight in the other, my boots soft on the hardwood floor. Anyone here? I called out, my voice low but firm. No answer, just the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I checked the living room first. Couch, coffee table, a half-empty glass of wine on the counter. Nothing out of place, like then the kitchen dishes in the sink. A chair slightly askew, like someone had bumped it. My pulse quickened. I moved to the back door and there it was. As the lock scratched the frame, splintered like someone had tried to pry it open. Not forced all the way, but enough to get in. My grip on the bat tightened. Whoever it was, they'd been here. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. The hallway was narrow, lined with closed doors. I checked each one: bathroom, guest room, her bedroom. The bed was unmade sheets, tangled like she'd bolted out in a panic. A window was cracked open, letting in a draft, but no one was there. No footprints, no mess, just signs of a quick exit. Whoever it was, they were gone. I double-checked every closet, every corner, my flashlight cutting through the shadows. Nothing, just a house that felt violated, like it had held on to the intruder's presence. I went back outside, finding Claire exactly where I'd left her, still clutching her robe. Her eyes locked on me wide with hope and dread. It's clear, I said, keeping my voice calm. No one's in there now, but your back door has been messed with. Looks like someone tried to get in, maybe got spooked and left. She exhaled a shaky breath but didn't relax. You sure they're gone? She asked. I nodded. I checked every room. You're safe, but we should report this. She shook her head again, firmer this time. No, I can't. Not after everything. I just need to know it's okay now. Her voice was small, like she was trying to convince herself. I studied her for a moment. Her bare feet on the grass. The way her hands trembled even as she tried to hide it. She looked smaller than the woman I'd seen rushing to her car with sunglasses in a wall of distance. You got anyone to call? I asked. Family, friends. She looked down, her voice barely audible. No one nearby? Not anymore. The words hit me harder than they should have. I knew that kind of alone. I'd lived it since Dad died. Come inside, I said, nodding toward my house. You shouldn't be alone tonight. She hesitated, then followed me across the street. Inside, I handed her a blanket from the couch and flicked on a small lamp, its warm glow softening the room. She sat, pulling the blanket tight around her, still shivering. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor. I didn't know where else to go. I sat across from her, not too close, giving her space. You did the right thing, I said. I'm just across the street. She looked up then, her eyes meeting mine for the first time that night. They were dark, heavy with something unspoken, but there was a flicker of gratitude, maybe even trust. I'll stay till morning, I added. Make sure you're okay. She nodded, a small, tired smile breaking through. It was the first time I'd seen her smile, and it changed everything. Claire sat on my couch, the blanket draped over her shoulders, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea I dug out from the back of my cupboard. The lamp cast a soft glow, making the room feel smaller, warmer, like it was just us against the world outside. She hadn't said much since we came inside, and I didn't push. I knew what it was like to need silence, to let the noise in your head settle. I leaned back in the armchair across from her, my bat still propped against the wall, the flashlight on the coffee table. The clock ticked past 4 a.m., but neither of us seemed to notice. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this," she said finally, her voice low like she was testing the air. Her eyes flicked up to mine, then back to the mug. I didn't know who else to turn to. I shrugged, trying to keep it light. "You didn't drag me. I'm just across the street. Besides, I wasn't exactly sleeping soundly." She gave a small laugh, more breath than sound, and it felt like a victory. "You sure about that? You looked half dead when you opened the door." I grinned, caught off guard. "Yeah, well, night shifts will do that. You're lucky I didn't answer in my boxers." Her smile widened just a fraction. And for a moment, she didn't look like the scared woman who'd knocked on my door. She looked real. Not the guarded neighbor with sunglasses and quick steps, but someone who could laugh even after a night like this. "I owe you," she said, her tone softer now, "for checking the house for this." She nodded at the tea, the blanket, the room. "Most people would have just called the cops and gone back to bed." I shook my head. "I'm not most people. And you didn't want cops. I get it." She looked at me, then really looked like she was trying to figure out what I meant. I didn't elaborate. Some things you don't explain. You just feel them. We sat there as the sky outside started to lighten, the first hints of dawn creeping through the blinds. Claire started talking slow at first, like she was unwrapping something fragile. "I moved here to start over," she said. "After the divorce, the city was too much. Too many people, too many memories. I thought a quiet place like this would be safe." But tonight she stopped, her fingers tightening around the mug. Tonight, even the quiet felt like it was out to get me. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Quiet can do that. It's not always what it seems. Sometimes it just hides things." She nodded like she'd been carrying that thought for a while. "What about you?" she asked. "Why are you here in this town in that uniform working nights?" I wasn't expecting the question. Most people don't ask, they assume. I looked down at my hands, still smudged with grease from a shift 2 days ago. "My dad died a couple years back." I said the words heavier than I meant them to be. "Car accident. After that, Mom left and I stayed. This house, this job, it's what I know. Keeps me steady." She tilted her head, studying me. "Steady is good, but it sounds lonely." I met her gaze, surprised by how easily she saw through me. "Yeah, I admitted it is sometimes. That was it for a while. We didn't need to fill the silence." She sipped her tea. I stared at the floor and the world outside kept turning. When the sun was fully up, I offered to walk her back home. She hesitated, then nodded. "I'll be okay," she said. But it sounded like she was convincing herself. I grabbed my jacket. "I'm walking you anyway." She didn't argue. Her house looked different in the daylight, less ominous. Just a normal place with a slightly crooked mailbox and a porch that needed sweeping. I checked the back door again, making sure the scratches weren't worse than I'd thought. "You need a new lock," I said, crouching to inspect it. "This one's shot. I can fix it later if you want." She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You don't have to do that." I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. "I know, but I'm good with my hands, and you shouldn't be sleeping in a house with a busted lock." She looked at me, her expression softer than I'd ever seen. "Okay, thank you, Ethan." Over the next few days, I found myself checking on her more than I planned. I'd knock on her door after my shift just to make sure she was all right. She'd answer sometimes with a tired smile, sometimes with a cup of coffee already waiting. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said one morning, leaning against her kitchen counter, her hair tied back in a loose braid. She was in a sweater and jeans, no makeup, and I couldn't help noticing how the sunlight caught her eyes, dark, steady. like they held stories she wasn't ready to tell. "I know," I said, sipping the coffee she'd handed me. "But it's not a big deal. I'm right across the street." She raised an eyebrow, a hint of a tease in her voice. "You're not what I expected from a night guard, Ethan." I smirked. And you're not what I expected from a neighbor." Those moments started piling up, small, quiet exchanges that felt like they meant more than they should. One evening, I was on her porch showing her how to check her windows for weak latches. She stood closer than she needed to her shoulder, brushing mine as she listened. "You're handy," she said, her voice light but warm. "Where'd you learn all this?" I shrugged, trying not to let her closeness throw me. "Dad, he was always fixing something. Said a man should know how to take care of things." She nodded, her gaze lingering. "He taught you well." Another night, I brought over a spare flashlight from my work bag. The kind with a heavy base and a bright beam. "Keep this by your bed," I said, handing it to her. "Just in case." She took it, her fingers brushing mine, and didn't pull away right away. "You're making it hard to stay scared," she said, half joking. But her eyes said something else, something softer, like trust. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, my throat tight. It wasn't all serious. She started teasing me about my takeout habit, pointing out the pizza boxes piling up in my trash. "You ever cook?" she asked one morning, handing me a bagel she'd toasted. "Not unless you count instant noodles," I said. And she laughed, a real laugh that made her face light up. I told her about the time I tried to fix a coworker's car and ended up with oil in my hair for a week. She told me about her love for old jazz records, how she'd play them late at night when she couldn't sleep. "You've probably heard them," she said, a little embarrassed. "I have," I admitted. "They're nice. Makes the street feel less empty." Each conversation peeled back a layer. She told me about her divorce. Not the details, but enough. Her ex was controlling, left her feeling like she was never enough. She moved here to rebuild, to find peace. But peace was harder than she'd thought. I told her about my dad, how I still kept his coin collection in a box under my bed, how I sometimes felt like I was letting him down by staying so small. "You're not small," she said once, her voice firm. "You're steady. There's a difference." I didn't know why, but that stuck with me. By the end of the week, I was spending more time at her place than my own. Not long, just enough for a coffee, a check on the house, a shared laugh over something small. I started noticing things. How she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. How her hands moved when she talked about music. How she looked at me like she was seeing me, not just the guy across the street. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew I didn't want it to stop. It was noon, a couple of days after I'd started checking on Claire regularly. A light rain had begun to fall, the kind that makes the air smell clean and leaves the street slick and reflective. I was under her porch, crouched by the back door, my toolbox opened beside me. The old lock was a mess, scratched and loose, barely holding the frame together. I'd promised to replace it, and I wasn't about to let her sleep in a house that felt like an open invitation to trouble. My hands moved on autopilot, unscrewing the old bolts, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the past week. Her laugh, the way she handed me coffee like it was the most natural thing, the way her eyes softened when she looked at me. Claire appeared in the doorway holding a steaming mug of coffee. She was in a loose sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back, but a few strands loose, curling in the damp air. "You didn't have to do this, you know," she said, her voice carrying that quiet warmth I was starting to crave. I glanced up, wiping sweat from my forehead despite the cool day. "Yeah, I know, but I'd rather not have you knocking at 3 a.m. again." She smiled, a real one, the kind that reached her eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. "Fair enough," she said, stepping closer and holding out the mug. "Here. You look like you need this more than me." I took the coffee, our fingers brushing for a second. Her hands were warm from the mug, and I felt a jolt like a current running through me. I set the mug down on the porch, trying to focus on the lock, but she didn't move away. She stood there close enough that I could smell her shampoo, something soft like lavender. The rain pattered on the roof above us, a steady rhythm that made the moment feel separate from the rest of the world. "You're good at this," she said, nodding at the tools. Fixing things, making things safe. I shrugged. Tightening a screw comes with a job. You learn to handle what's broken. She was quiet for a moment, watching me work. Then she spoke, her voice softer, almost hesitant. That night, I don't think I'd have made it through without you, Ethan. I stopped, my hand stilling on the screwdriver. Her words hung in the air, heavy with something I couldn't quite name. I looked up, meeting her gaze, and for the first time I saw her without the wall she'd built. Her eyes were dark, steady, unguarded, like she was letting me in on purpose. You would have been fine, I said, my voice rougher than I meant. You're tougher than you look. She shook her head, a faint smile, tugging at her lips. Maybe, but I didn't feel tough then. I felt alone until you opened the door. Before I could respond, she stepped closer, her hand reaching out to rest on my shoulder. It was light, barely there, like a breeze you almost miss, but it stopped me cold. My heart thudded loud enough I was sure she could hear it. I don't think I knocked on the wrong door that night, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but every word clear, deliberate. I froze, the screwdriver still in my hand. My eyes locked on hers. She didn't move. Her hand didn't look away. The rain kept falling. The world stayed quiet. And for a moment it was just us. Her hand on my shoulder. Her words sinking into me like they were rewriting something inside. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat was tight. I'd spent 2 years keeping people at arm's length ever since Dad died. I told myself it was easier that way, safer. No one could leave if you didn't let them in. But Claire, her touch, her voice, the way she looked at me like I was more than just the guy across the street, cracked something open. I thought about the age gap, the 15 years between us. I wondered if she saw me as some kid, if this was just gratitude talking. But her eyes didn't say gratitude. They said something else. Something that scared me and pulled me in all at once. You don't have to say anything, she said, her hand still on my shoulder, her voice steady now. I just wanted you to know. She stepped back, breaking the moment, and picked up the coffee mug I'd set down. Finish the lock. I'll be inside if you need me. She turned and walked back into the house, leaving the door open, the faint sound of jazz drifting out. I stared at the lock, my hands moving again, but my mind was somewhere else. For the first time in years, I didn't want to look away. I didn't want to go back to my side of the street, and that scared me more than any footsteps in the dark ever could. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called in sick to work. It wasn't a big deal, just a night off, something any guy might do after a long week. But for me, it felt like a choice, like I was stepping out of the routine I'd built to keep the world at a distance. I sat on my porch instead, the air cool and heavy with the scent of rain-soaked grass. Across the street, Claire's house glowed softly, her living room light casting a warm square onto her lawn. I watched it, not staring, just waiting for what I wasn't sure. Her light flickered, then went out. My heart gave a little kick like it knew something I didn't. A minute later, her front door opened and there she was standing in the frame, her silhouette sharp against the dim hallway behind her. She was in a sweater, jeans, her hair loose now, catching the faint glow of the street lamp. She didn't say anything, didn't wave. She just raised her hand, palm up, like an invitation, like she was saying, "Come over." My breath caught, and without thinking, I stood up, crossed the street, and stepped onto her porch. She moved aside and I walked in. The door closed behind us, soft as a whisper, and the world outside went quiet. Inside, her house smelled like cedar and coffee with that faint hint of lavender I'd caught earlier. A jazz record played low in the background, something slow and soulful, the kind that makes you feel like time standing still. She gestured toward the couch, and I sat, my hands resting awkwardly on my knees. She sat across from me, not too close, but close enough that I could see the way her eyes softened in the lamplight. "You didn't go to work," she said. Not a question, just an observation. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. Figured I'd take a night off. Check on you instead. Her lips curved. Not quite a smile, but something warm. "You've been doing a lot of that lately." We didn't talk much at first. She offered me a glass of water, and I took it mostly to have something to hold. The silence wasn't heavy, though it was comfortable, like we'd done this 100 times. I noticed small things. A stack of old books on her coffee table. A framed photo of a beat she'd probably never mentioned. The way her fingers traced the rim of her glass when she was thinking. "You okay?" I asked, breaking the quiet. After everything, she nodded, her gaze steady. "Better. Because of you." Her words landed soft but heavy, like they carried more than she was saying. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "I'm not good at this. Talking, being here." I gestured vaguely at the room, at her, at whatever this was. She leaned forward, her elbows on her knees, her eyes locked on mine. "You're better at it than you think," she said. "You showed up, Ethan, that night and every day since. That's more than most people do." I swallowed, my throat tight. I thought about my dad, how he'd always said showing up was half the battle. I thought about the years I'd spent not showing up for anyone, not even myself. And here was Claire seeing me in a way I hadn't been seen in a long time. "I don't know what this is," I admitted, my voice low. "You and me? I mean, I trailed off, the age gap hanging between us like a question I didn't know how to ask. She tilted her head, her expression soft but unflinching. "Older," she finished for me. "Yeah, I am, and you're younger, but I don't think that's what matters." She paused, then added, "What matters is you were there when I needed someone. And I think maybe I'm here for you, too." Her words hit me like a quiet truth when I hadn't let myself consider. We sat there, the jazz filling the gaps, the night stretching out beyond the walls. I thought about that 3 a.m. knock, how it had pulled me out of my safe, solitary world. I thought about her hand on my shoulder earlier, the way it felt like an anchor and a spark all at once. I didn't know what forever looked like, and I wasn't ready to pretend I did. But I knew I wanted to be here in this moment with her. "I'm glad you knocked," I said finally, my voice steady for the first time that night. She smiled. A real one, the kind that made her eyes crinkle again. "I'm glad it was your door." The night didn't end with a kiss or a grand gesture. It ended with us sitting there talking about nothing and everything. Jazz coffee, the way the rain sounded on her roof. The door stayed closed. The world stayed out. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I didn't know where this was going, but I knew I wasn't running from it. A knock at 3 a.m., a scared neighbor, a coffee in the rain. It wasn't a story I'd planned to live. But maybe life doesn't warn you when it's about to change. Maybe it just shows up trembling and asks you to be there. And maybe, just maybe, that's